Sometimes evil creeps into our lives.
I just didn't trust him and didn't think that he belonged in the home.
He's dangerous. He's dangerous, he said to me.
And sometimes it's invited.
John Adair didn't want strangers in the house.
Imagine walking into your own house and fearing for your life.
He said, he's back.
On August 6th, 1995, police in Rancho Mirage, California respond to a desperate 911 call from the luxurious home of Dr. John Adair. What they find is shocking. It's a bloodbath. 56-year-old John Adair and his boyfriend John Mix have been shot.
Who did this to you?
As Adair clings to life, police press him for answers.
Who did this to you?
Who had it in for this wealthy couple? And why? John Adair first moved to Rancho Mirage from Philadelphia with his longtime partner, Bob Tucker. Between Tucker's family inheritance and Adair's post as head of radiology at Girard Medical Center, the couple has amassed a considerable fortune.
Thank you for being part of this. We've worked so hard to be accepted.
And they like to share it with children in need by offering them a place in their home.
My brother John, he was definitely an outside person, an underdog. I think he thought that I can help them, I can be with them, so that they don't go through the same things that I did.
I think he knew what it was like to feel other, to feel outcast, and to try to find a place for himself in society.
I met John Adair when I was fairly young. I was about 15 years old, and I met him when I was going through some family problems. He knew that I was living on couch to couch at the time because of my family situation. He offered to give me a place to stay. When he heard that my father had said, "Oh, you can't go to the prom because we're poor," I mean, the first thing that John Adair said was, "Ridiculous. We're going to the store, we'll buy you a suit. You're going to the prom." And he was a really give from the heart kind of guy.
Of the 18 kids they fostered, John Adair and Bob Tucker form a particularly close bond with 15-year-old Tommy Maroney, who they rescue from the streets of Philadelphia.
Tommy was the challenge. He was rough.
John Adair met him years before in Philadelphia, and I knew his mother, knew his family, but she just wasn't able to provide what he needed, and so, he really had trouble in school, and he really couldn't read very well.
John Adair got these young adults, and he took them from nothing and molded them into great people. And I think he saw that he could do that with Tommy.
And so in 1989, John Adair and Bob Tucker realized their dream of having a family by officially adopting Tommy.
Maybe you're bluffing.
That was the empty spot in his life, was that he wanted to have a child. He always felt this terrible guilt that his mother didn't really accept him for what he was and his lifestyle. So at one point, I think he had a longing to have an heir.
He wanted somebody that would carry his name. And he could say, as when we all got together, my son's doing this, my daughter's doing this.
He got me. He got me.
John Adair and Bob Tucker buy their new son, now 21, a small condo in neighboring Palm Springs. But Tommy spends most of his time in their new Rancho Mirage dream home. It's a sprawling, luxurious house with a swimming pool and a separate wing for guests. Tommy takes to his new California lifestyle.
Tommy acquired the taste of wealth, and his biggest fear was going back onto the street.
Tommy may like the high life, But Bob Tucker and John Adair insist he get a job. They set him up with a pool cleaning business.
When they moved to California, they got him a job doing swimming pools. And that didn't take because there was a four-letter curse word that Tommy didn't like. W-O-R-K. Work.
Look, guys, how about hiring someone to do this?
But isn't this what we set you up in business to do?
Yeah, well, I don't know what's wrong. I can't fix it. Look, just hire someone, okay? I'm out of here.
When John Adair would try to set Tommy up in something, I mean, it was very, very short-lived.
The way I understood it was that John Adair had a vision for Tommy of having a normal life. And he was driven to make that vision be reality. He had hoped to have Tommy have his own business. He had bought him a hot dog cart, and Tommy did not like to go to work. So that didn't work out so well.
John Adair told me that his biggest sadness was that he couldn't take the street out of Tommy, no matter how hard he tried.
But soon, Tommy's lack of motivation is overshadowed by tragedy. In January 1991, after 30 years together, Bob Tucker succumbs to AIDS. John Adair is devastated. Friends and family worry that he may not recover from the loss.
It was the end of two lives.
It'll get better after.
The end of Bob Tucker's and the end of my brother, John. I never saw someone grieve as much as he did. They had a kinship that you're lucky to find in any person.
His world had just ended. Essentially, he had lost his compass.
John's world will never be the same.
He tried to be strong, but it was so easy for him to open the bottle and find comfort because there was no one there for him.
Bob was the one who always drank milk, and Bob was the one who didn't drink, and Bob was the one who was the rock of Gibraltar of the family, and Bob was the one who prevented John Adair from, being too extravagant, and it was a very, very hard time, and John Adair was on the verge of having a nervous breakdown. It was a terrible, terrible time, and all his friends knew that this was going to be bad.
I was worried about him. Sometimes he'd call me and he sounded a little funny, and I said, "Why do you sound like that?" And he says, I miss Bob, but he also started drinking, more at that time.
Dad, we got some mail, and you're not gonna believe it, but it's from Bob.
And Bob continues to look out for John from beyond the grave.
Bob Tucker knew John Adair was probably going to spiral out of control. And I remember 1 year after Bob died, he got a delivery. And it was a special delivery. It was a check and a letter from Bob Tucker. And it said, I figured you've probably spent all the money by now. And it was a check for $10,000. And as you can see, it upsets me even to think about it because that letter and that check sent John over the edge. Tommy was there for him because there was a need for someone to fill in the role that Bob Tucker had played. Now, that was a tough pair of shoes to fill because You know, Bob did everything from watering down vodka to hiding the car keys and everything else.
Tommy knuckled under and said, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll go. And so he was the gopher. And so it pleased my brother to have his help in routine things.
Thank you. Thank you.
But there was little his new son could do to fill the void that Bob left.
He would call and say, I'm so empty. What can I do? And my advice was find something so you're not at home thinking of these things.
John takes his brother's advice and heads to Los Angeles for a week to clear his head. In LA, he meets John Mix, a handsome, young, successful events manager.
I'm John.
Hi, I'm John Mix.
Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you too.
And then one day we get a phone call, and
The music.
you could hear in his voice a childlike excitement.
Oh, terrific.
I found my true love again. And he says, Johnny, he's 39 years old, and he makes me feel so young. I just am so happy.
He says, oh, you know, I've met this person and he's, you know, lovely to look at, and he lifts my heart, and he just sounded like a person in love, you know, and he would say, I think this is the one. I think, you know, and he just appeared to be happier and have more energy and, you know, looking forward to doing things once again. They traveled, they started going to, you know, different places on the weekends. They took a trip to Greece, they took lots of pictures. He was just happier. In some ways, John Mix reminded me of Bob Tucker in that he was, you know, kind of a nice, calming influence. I felt it was a good relationship.
But not everyone is happy about the new couple. With Adair spending more and more time with John Mix, Tommy, now 24, is left at home alone to tend to the Rancho Mirage mansion.
Hello? May I speak to Dad?
It's your son.
Okay. Hey, Tommy, how's it going?
Listen, Dad. The shower's broken again, you've been gone for weeks, and we need someone here to fix it. I can't be counted on to do this all the time.
John Adair and John Mix were having fun and enjoying themselves, and Tom Adair was keeping up the house while they were gone.
I think that Tommy was getting tired of coming there and being like the gopher guy for everything needed to be done. You know, Tommy felt as though they call me when they need something, but then they talk about me and badmouth me when I'm not there. And
Oh, for sure. For the sales?
What you got? What you got?
Oh, yeah.
is terrific.
I need a
Remember
small
me?
Son, you startled me. I'm sorry. How are you? Come, give your dad a hug. Come on.
John Mix is put out by Tommy's presence.
It was definitely a third wheel. You know, if you want to come home and have a glass of wine with the person you love and a romantic dinner, here's Tommy, you know, playing the music and walking through, and, you know, it was definitely not what he wanted. And I think they started butting heads together.
What he saw when he came was someone who was getting John Adair drunk.
I was just wondering if you could give me some money to fix it.
John Mix wanted Tommy out of the house.
You know what, Dad? That's great.
Tommy, in turn, is equally suspicious of John Mix's interest in his father.
Let's go out.
I think there was a little bit of question among all the friends, and myself included. What's this really good-looking, young, gay guy
Thanks, Dad.
doing with John Adair, you know? John Adair was no beauty queen. It seemed like they were out of each other's league.
Soon, suspicion and greed will turn this once happy home into a house of horrors.
I just didn't trust him and didn't think that he belonged in the home.
It's one thing to walk into a bad neighborhood, and look around and say, we've got to get out of here. But how do you get out of your own house?
With each visit to the Rancho Mirage house, the rivalry between John Adair's boyfriend, John Mix, and Adair's adopted son, Tommy, grows.
Tommy, when are you gonna grow up and stop being such a freeloading slob?
Tommy starts abusing his privileges.
If he ate something or drank something, I mean, he'd either leave it out or leave the dishes just in the sink. When he stayed there, he brought a girlfriend with him, and John Adair didn't want strangers in the house. Tommy would just walk in like he owned the place, and I could see by the expression on John Mix's face that he didn't care for that. You know, he just didn't like it.
John Adair pushes his son to move permanently into his condo to alleviate the growing tension.
I think that once Tommy had gotten the house in Palm Desert to be move-in ready, I think that John Mix felt that it was high time for Tommy to get out of the house and be on his own. I don't think John Mix was terribly fond of Tommy at all. And I think that that went both ways.
Anybody here?
John Adair spends more and more time with Mix in L.A., and the Rancho Mirage mansion becomes neglected.
Hello?
Tommy drops by every once in a while, but it's not enough.
Tommy, what are you doing here?
Told me to watch the place, remember?
Yeah, but I thought you'd be at your condo.
Look, Dad, I gotta level with you. This place is too much for one man to clean up.
Tommy suggests that he hire his new friend, Johnny Baca, who's down on his luck and living in a trailer park.
Okay. You trust the guy 100%.
They actually met in the parking lot of a Chinese restaurant in Palm Springs.
What's up, dude? You need a hand?
Tommy was very much into cars and motors and things like that, and Baca was too, and they were also into bodybuilding. That's how their relationship formed, kind of like, call me, and they'd get together and hang out.
You know, he was pulling at John Adair's heartstrings. You know, this is a kid just like me. You should let him in. Let him, it'll, fill a temporary need of having somebody in the house and, keeping it picked up and keeping it clean, probably bringing in the mail, things like that.
Tommy was selling it to John Adair as being, here's your housekeeper, here's the person that's gonna clean the dishes, cook the meals, do the vacuum, do errands for you.
Adair agrees to give Johnny Baca a shot.
Baca was really, really happy about his job position. He didn't have a job before. Obviously, he really maybe didn't have somewhere to really stay, so that made it harder for Johnny to get employment. But Mr. Adair made him feel welcome, and he was a very nice man, well respected. They became really good friends.
Mr. Baca, I'd like to welcome you to this house. You are going to be a very good addition to this place.
You won't regret it, I promise.
I'm sure I won't.
Thanks. John Adair liked to have good-looking guys around. I mean, if he could have had the Chippendales working at his house all day long doing pool and doing stuff, he would have loved that. He would have been in heaven. I mean, that's what he liked.
But 3 weeks later, when John Adair returns from L.A. with John Mix, he realizes he may have been too hasty with his decision to have Baca move in.
John, I didn't know you were here.
Yes, we arrived late last night.
Oh, you brought a friend.
Mix is not pleased with the new addition to the household.
Hi, I'm John Mix. Nice to meet you too.
John Mix did not like the idea of having somebody like Johnny Baca in the home.
I don't believe that John Mix was used to dealing with people that were from the lower echelons of life.
Just looking at Johnny Baca, you could see that there was a disconnect, that somebody like him did not belong in the home. He was the kind of person that John Adair and I would say, you better count the silver. John Mix was pressuring John Adair to get Johnny Baca out of the house. John Adair told me about it, that, that John Mix really wanted him out of the house, and sooner. It was causing tension in their relationship. When John Adair would tell me about it, I would say, well, he's right.
He's a good kid.
I agreed with him. I just didn't trust him and didn't think that he belonged in the home.
Fix it, John.
I will fix it. I will fix it.
Others believe that Mix is just jealous of Baca.
Mix was really on Adair about having Johnny Baca move, and Adair kept telling him, no, he can stay as long as he wants because that's his house. There was no friction until Mix felt that Adair had feelings for Baca more than just a friend. Maybe Adair did something inappropriate or maybe talking about Johnny too much or wanting Johnny around too much. What could cause jealousy? I don't know. That's the only reason they were arguing. He was jealous of Baca. He was afraid that Adair was starting to have feelings for Baca.
Deal the next card.
In the early summer of 1995, 3.5 years after Adair and Mix meet, their relationship starts to fall apart. Mix stays away from the Rancho Mirage mansion for weeks at a time, and Adair falls into a deep depression.
John Adair was fearing that he was going to lose John Mix.
And he was drinking again, and that made him even more vulnerable. So he drank some more.
Tommy and Baca, meanwhile, are spending a lot of time together at the Rancho Mirage house.
I'm out of vodka. I need somebody to go to the store for me.
Dad, I literally picked some up this afternoon. Just go upstairs and get it.
Oh.
Tommy would come in from the liquor store with big bottles of vodka. The drinking was a real weakness for John Adair.
And before long, the new and seemingly close friendship will take a dark turn.
He said, he's back.
He's dangerous. He's dangerous, he said to me.
Drifter Johnny Baca continues to make himself at home at the Rancho Mirage house. But his employer, John Adair, is beginning to have some very serious reservations about his new housemate. In the last week of July 1995, Adair calls his friend Valerie Malot in a panic.
Please, please. Thank you.
John Adair called me and he sounded frantic and very agitated, and he said, can you come over? And I said, yeah, do you mean on the weekend? He said, no, can you come over right now? And I said, sure, because just the way he sounded, I came over.
Thank you for coming.
What happened to your eye?
It was Baca. We had a fight.
I think he was embarrassed that, he'd been beaten up so badly. And he didn't want, police in, because out here the local paper always prints the police, blotter, and he didn't want that to happen. And I think because of John Adair's relationship with John Mix, he wouldn't want John Mix to get to know this, and maybe it was a little secret.
I'm gonna take care of it.
Okay.
I said, well, then he has to go. But he definitely, John Adair seemed fearful.
Valerie convinces Adair to kick Johnny Baca out immediately.
I went into Johnny Baca's room, and he didn't have much in the way of belongings. I put everything in the box. And, you know, his belongings filled one box, and I put it at the end of the driveway.
It seems that his boyfriend, John Mix, is right to worry. John Adair has been keeping some secrets.
I was quite shocked. And I said, what happened? He said, he's dangerous. He's dangerous, he said to me. He said, we were playing, and then it got out of hand. Now, when he says playing,
You weak, worthless failure.
John Adair was into like a little bit of the bondage. And I said to him, so what happened? I said, you guys didn't have like a safe word?
Character that's nobody loves you.
He said he wouldn't stop. He just started punching me.
He asked him to leave. They got into a fist fight, and he got the black eye. And I could just imagine, my brother was not a fighter. He got a guy that lifts weights, is bodybuilder, tough guy, living with two people that are society people. They don't work out, they don't do anything to build muscles. They were fearful.
With good reason. That night, when Baca finds his belongings on the street, he calls the police to claim he's been wrongfully evicted.
Good evening, sir. Could I get you to step outside for a second, please?
Okay.
You okay, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, well, anyway, this gentleman here tells me that you evicted him earlier this evening.
That's kind of what happened.
All right, well, according to California state law, you have to give somebody 30 days notice before you evict them. So unfortunately, you have to let the gentleman back in the house.
Because Johnny Baca received mail there, and he had this listed as his address, he couldn't be put out unless there was a 30-day notice given.
See you tomorrow, Johnny.
Finally, Baca agrees to go to Tommy's. For now.
Hello?
Hey, Dad, it's Tommy.
Hi, Tommy.
Yeah, listen, I'm here with Johnny. Apparently you kicked him out? What's that about, Dad?
You don't know the whole story.
You know what, Dad? That's against the law.
So
Tommy
just take it
was
back, because right now, what you
pestering John Adair a lot to let Johnny Baca back into the home, telling him, well, it was a one-time thing, it wouldn't happen again, that he would be on the street, and pulling at John Adair's heartstrings.
Dad, I really thought you were better than that. Really, I did. Guess I was wrong.
The next morning, Johnny Baca comes back.
That's all you need is mail. And he was brought back into the house.
By the time that all of this transpired, they were so entangled. Baca was so entrenched in the house already. It was as though he were taking over the house. And John Adair felt as though he wasn't at home in his own house.
think you could go into Palm Springs tomorrow and get some groceries?
Yeah, John, no problem. I'll be going downtown tomorrow, so when I get a chance, I'll pick that stuff up.
Thank you. I think I should go to bed now.
Yeah, I think so too. You have a good night.
It was obviously, he just wasn't a nice person, but you know, he just had this kind of evil presence that.
Imagine walking into your own house and fearing for your life. It's one thing to walk into a bad neighborhood and look around and say, we've got to get out of here. But how do you get out of your own house? He was very fearful.
John, things are getting really weird here.
What's going on?
It's Baca.
Afraid for his safety, John Adair calls John Mix and asks him to come over for the weekend.
I'll come out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I miss you.
I miss you too.
But Mix's presence won't diffuse the growing tension. It'll make it worse. Much, much worse.
We made entry with our guns drawn, not knowing what we had there.
I was overwhelmed. I couldn't believe that this actually happened.
On August 6th, 1995, John Mix flies up to Rancho Mirage to spend the weekend with his boyfriend, John Adair. Adair asks Johnny Baca to pick Mix up at the airport, but Baca never shows.
John, Valerie, oh, I'm so glad you're here.
I had to pick up John Mix at the airport, the Palm Springs airport, because he flew out from LA because his car was being fixed. So I brought him out to the house, and, you know, he was quiet, and he says, I just hope, you know, the little bastard's not there. And I said, so do I.
Adair is furious that Baca failed to accomplish his one errand, and he takes decisive action.
I know. He's out.
Good.
When Baca finally shows up with Tommy that afternoon,
Really appreciate the help with the car, man.
Oh, anytime, Tommy, anytime, buddy.
You can use all the laundry facilities.
John Adair is showing his room to a girl who just happened to see an ad about a room to rent.
Okay, it's easy to live here.
Easy. Thanks a lot, John. This is how you want me finding out. I can't believe it. Friggin' out of here.
Come here for a sec.
Sorry, John. Listen, I'm apparently not living here anymore, so I'd appreciate it if you could give me a ride to LA later on tonight.
Sure. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You gonna be okay, bro?
I guess so, man. Take care.
With his friend's ride secure, Tommy leaves the house at 7 p.m.
Thank you for taking me to LA. We're gonna get
An hour later, the house spirals into mayhem.
I want things to go back to the way they were.
Thank you.
No. No!
Hey, bro! What have you done? No! Oh!
911, what's your emergency?
We made entry with our guns drawn, not knowing what we had there. What I saw when we entered was a middle-aged gentleman standing over a countertop in a kitchen with a bloody towel in his hand, holding it on his face, and a lot of blood at various places. There was another man completely unconscious, down with what appeared to be bullet wounds to his head.
There was a pool of blood where John Nix was shot. There was a pool of blood by the telephone where my brother was stood. And from what I understand, he was bleeding a handful like this every minute.
There was a handgun on the ground, and that was what we saw when we entered.
Who did this to you? I don't understand. Tell me.
He made a sound that I couldn't understand because, again, his injuries were to his face, and it was very difficult to understand him. I asked him again. He made a sound that sounded like "aka." He was very anxious to tell us who had hurt him and to point us in the right direction. Ultimately, he directed one of my other deputies to the bedroom where there was an address with Mr. Baca in a dresser, and that had information with Baca's name on it.
John Nix was shot twice. He died shortly after arriving at the hospital. Adair was shot once. He is still alive, but hanging on by a thread and lapsing in and out of consciousness. His family is horrified.
Dennis's mother called on a Sunday afternoon and said to Dennis, "My God, John Adair's been shot." I was overwhelmed. I couldn't believe that this actually happened, that my brother-in-law, who I cared a lot for, was on life support.
Dennis Adair immediately travels to his brother's side and later heads over to John's house for some rest. When he arrives, he's surprised to see Tommy.
It was not secured at that point. There was no tape around the house, so anybody could go in.
What are you doing here?
Well, figured I'd clean up. I mean, no one's here to do it, so figured I would.
You know what? I really think it's time for you to go.
Time for me to go? I live here. I have a
no,
right
you
to...
don't live here anymore. You go now.
I found it very odd how he was cleaning up. It was like he was trying to hide something.
Based on Adair's seeming identification of Baca, the police immediately obtain a warrant for his arrest. But he's disappeared, and law enforcement launch a manhunt to find him. As the chase gets underway, investigators suspect Baca may not have acted alone.
The motive in this case was money, a will.
I think that John Adair was just basically ready to cut the rope.
On August 10th, 1995, millionaire John Adair remains in critical condition at Eisenhower Medical Center after being shot at his home 3 days earlier. Police wait for him to recover enough strength to assist them in the investigation. At the same time, they scour the area looking for their main suspect, Johnny Baca.
The name Baca was given. So at that point in time, now the police have to make a quick decision as to what this person has to do with this crime scene. I call these murder marathons because you don't stop. You don't go home. You don't continue with other appointments. You stay with this day and night until you secure a suspect and or the trail runs cold.
There was great concern that he could flee the country, and so it's imperative that you put all your resources and trying to find him as soon as you can. Mr. Baca had stolen a car belonging to one of the victims, which eventually was found in Los Angeles County, and he was at a park in LA County, and 2 deputy sheriffs happened to be conducting a check of the park, and they came upon several individuals.
Hey, 1 minute. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Like to see your ID.
I don't got any ID.
Yeah, what did you just drop here?
That's not mine.
Hold on a sec.
What's the problem?
Johnny Baca, get down on your knees. You're under arrest. Get down on your knees right now. Get down on your knees. What did I do, man?
On August 15th, 1995, Baca is arrested for the murder of John Mix and the attempted murder of John Adair. The next day, Adair succumbs to his injuries. Any hope of recovering additional details about what happened that night is lost.
Here was my friend of more than 30 years. I was outside my body. I mean, I was just in disbelief.
It's been years and I'm still teary-eyed. Because he was such a good person.
As the police continue their investigation, they begin to suspect that there is more to the murder than meets the eye.
As I started interviewing witnesses, more and more information started coming out, which was now beginning to implicate Thomas Adair, the adopted son.
John Adair told us that he was going to take Tom Adair out of his will because he didn't want to throw any more good money after bad, that he didn't want him to be his heir.
He called me at work. He was saying, I'm sure I'm making changes in my will, and first step is I want to take him off the insurance policies.
I think that John Adair was just basically ready to cut the rope.
Some people think that Tommy was perhaps the mastermind behind the death of Mix and Adair.
When we started learning that Thomas Adair was the adopted son and his connection to the family there and where he was living, and then information was becoming greater in Thomas Adair's involvement in the possibility that this murder was planned.
Manuel Lopez even speculates that Tommy may have had a motive.
The motive in this case was money, a will, and the biggest part is that Thomas Adair was adopted by John Adair. That relationship started to go sour. So Thomas was now pressured to move up a plan in order to secure that will. Baca wasn't in the will. The only motive that Baca would have done was to partner up with Tom Adair and actually be a benefactor of the insurance money and the will.
Really have no idea what's going on.
Investigators press Baca for more information.
Really don't even know why I'm here.
He tells the police a different version of the events of the night of August 6th, 1995.
So I packed my bags, I was waiting at the entrance, and all of a sudden him and John Adair were having it out. There was full-blown argument in the kitchen.
I'm taking Baca tonight to LA, and that's it. He's out of our lives.
He's my friend. You're not taking my friend away.
He's no friend.
And I was waiting, and I realized the time I had to get out of there. So I grabbed the BMW keys. I got in the car and I went to LA, and I have no idea my involvement.
All Baca wanted to do was just, he wanted to get out of there.
And as far as Tommy's concerned, he's just my buddy. And
Baca strongly denies any conspiracy and claims he doesn't know who committed the murders.
That's pretty much all I know.
Many times when you have a partner and one partner goes into custody and one isn't, that person that's in custody will likely say something in order to get the best deal that he can. Baca, at that point in time, thought that he could beat the case. Still come up with the money that Tommy Adair is going to get, and they would both be scot-free.
The murder weapon. I don't know anything about any murder weapon. I don't know anything about a gun.
Try as they might, investigators can't find any evidence of a conspiracy.
Really, I mean...
Even the gun found at the scene cannot be traced back to either Baca or Tommy.
There's a lot of supposition about what happened or didn't happen. And based on what we had, based on the evidence, and theory is only as good as the evidence that supports it. You needed eyewitnesses, and you needed physical evidence. And we didn't have either of those.
You don't want to issue an arrest warrant for a person unless you have all the information that you need to prosecute. If you did that, that would be a fishing expedition, and we don't do that.
With no evidence to prove that Tommy is in any way linked to the crime, he's dropped as a person of interest.
Good luck, clowns.
Only Baca is charged.
John, I'm taking Baca to the airport.
Later, at the trial, Baca's lawyer implies that Mix and Adair may have been having a lover's quarrel that turned violent.
The defense wanted to paint a picture that there was a love triangle and that John Mix and John Adair had an argument, and John Adair, who never had any liking for guns whatsoever, had a gun, and he shot John Mix point blank and then shot himself twice.
I mean, okay, gee, I failed, so I better shoot myself again. And then I'm going to get up and call 911 for help, because I didn't die.
There was a kind of a murmur of a chuckle going through the courtroom because it was so absurd.
On August 4th, 1997, a jury finds Johnny Baca guilty of the first-degree murders of John Adair and John Mix. He is sentenced to 55 years to life in prison. 4 years later, the case is successfully appealed. But after a second trial in October 2002, the jury finds Baca guilty again, and he is given an even more severe sentence of 70 years to life. Tommy Adair inherits almost all of John Adair's money. Nearly 10 years later, on October 16, 2012, he is found dead in his apartment, taking any secrets to the grave with him. He was just 45 years old. Family and friends still cherish their memories of John Adair and John Mix.
John Mix was very, very handsome, very calm, he was a lovely person, he really was.
The effect that he had on John Adair, it was just so refreshing. It was, you couldn't help but get caught up in it. He was a wonderful guy, that he was, a great partner and giving and loving. And he was much too young to have this happen and his family to be devastated as well.
I'm a better man for having known John Adair. Don't give up. Don't quit. You could do it. Despite what life throws your way, you just keep your head up. That was his attitude.
Nobody deserves to die in that way. John Adair especially didn't deserve to die in that way because he'd always been so good to so many people. I never knew him to hurt anybody. That he was constantly generous. There was no reason for that. John Mix didn't deserve to die in that way, or any way. I mean, they both had a lot of years still to go.
My brother always saw the best in people. And he was right 99% of the time. He only got stung once. It cost him his life. He was such a good person. He did no harm. He was a loving person.
Thank you.